If your child called you at midnight in fear, would you believe them? I didn't have a choice. Because my son, an RCMP officer, whispered one warning. Don't open the door, not for anyone. But I did, and that changed everything. The night was unusually quiet in our small town of Clearwater, British Columbia. Winter had settled deep into the valley, covering the streets with a thin sheet of ice that shimmered under the moonlight. The tall pine trees outside my house stood like silent guards, their branches heavy with snow. Every now and then, the wind brushed past them, making a soft whispering sound against my windows. Inside, the house felt warm and peaceful. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes. The kitchen smelled faintly of soap and roasted chicken from earlier that evening. I wiped my hands on a towel and turned off the light above the sink. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Tick, tick, tick. It was already past midnight. Most nights, I went to bed by 11, but that night, sleep didn't come easily. I couldn't explain why. I just felt restless, like something was about to happen. I walked into the living room and sat on the couch. A small lamp in the corner gave off a soft yellow glow. Outside, the street was empty. No cars, no footsteps. Just darkness. I picked up a photo frame from the table beside me. It was a picture of my son Daniel. He stood proudly in his RCMP uniform, wearing his wide, brimmed hat and that confident smile he always had. I remembered the day the photo was taken. He had just completed his training and couldn't stop talking about how excited he was to serve his community. "Don't worry about me, Mom," he had said back then. "I'll be careful." Daniel had always been brave, even as a child. When he was 10 years old, he once helped an elderly neighbor who had fallen on the sidewalk. He stayed with her until help arrived. That was just who he was. Helpful, fearless, but police work was dangerous. I tried not to think about that too often. He usually called me once every few days, just to check in. Sometimes he told me funny stories from work. Other times he sounded tired but proud. I smiled at the photo and placed it back on the table. That's when it happened. The phone rang. The sudden sound sliced through the silence like a knife. I jumped. No one calls at midnight unless something is wrong. My eyes moved slowly to the clock on the wall. 12:07 a.m. My chest tightened. A strange chill moved through my body, even though the room was warm. The phone rang again. Ring, ring, ring. Each sound felt louder than the last. For a moment, I just stared at it. I didn't want to answer. Something deep inside me whispered that this call would change everything. But I couldn't ignore it. I stood up slowly and walked toward the small table where the phone rested. My feet felt heavy, like I was moving through water. My hand trembled as I reached for the receiver. Another ring echoed through the house. I picked it up. "Hello," I said quietly. At first, there was nothing. Just silence. Then I heard breathing. Slow, uneven, shaky breathing. My heart began pounding so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. "Hello," I repeated, louder this time. Then a voice spoke. "Mom." My breath caught in my throat. It was Daniel. But something was terribly wrong. His voice sounded weak, almost like he was whispering through pain. "Daniel," I said quickly. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" There was a pause. In the background, I heard strange noises. A metallic clanging sound like chains hitting the floor. Then a faint echo, as if he was inside a large empty room. "Listen carefully," he whispered. His voice shook. "If anyone comes to the house tomorrow, don't open the door." My fingers tightened around the receiver. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Daniel, where are you?" Another loud metal noise echoed behind him. "Promise me," he said urgently. "Don't open the door, not for anyone." Fear spread through my chest like ice. "Are you in trouble?" I asked. "Tell me what's happening." For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he spoke again, lower this time. "I made a mistake. I trusted the wrong person." My heart skipped a beat. "What person?" I asked desperately. But before he could answer, I heard something else. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps. They sounded close to him. Daniel inhaled sharply. "They're coming," he whispered. My stomach dropped. "Daniel, wait. Who's coming?" His voice grew even quieter. "Mom locked the doors. Stay inside. And whatever happens, don't trust." The line went dead. Silence. I stared at the phone in disbelief. "Daniel," I whispered. No response. I pressed the receiver tighter to my ear, hoping to hear something, anything. Nothing. Just emptiness. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. Slowly, I lowered the phone back onto its base. The house suddenly felt colder. Larger. More dangerous. I rushed to the front door and checked the lock. Locked. Then the back door. Locked. I pulled the curtains shut on every window, my movements quick and nervous. Every shadow outside looked suspicious. Every small sound made me jump. The wind rattled the windows again, louder this time. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Daniel's voice repeating in my head, "Don't open the door." Hours passed slowly, like time itself had frozen. Finally morning arrived. A pale gray light filled the sky. Snowflakes drifted gently outside, covering the ground in silence. I tried to calm myself by making coffee, but my hands shook so badly that some spilled onto the counter. Then it happened. A loud knock echoed at the front door. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned slowly toward the sound. Another knock followed, firm and official. I glanced at the clock. 9:15 a.m. Someone stood outside my door, and Daniel's warning came rushing back into my mind. "Don't open the door, not for anyone." The knocking continued. Knock, knock, knock. Each sound echoed through the house like thunder. I stood frozen in the kitchen, clutching the edge of the counter. My coffee sat untouched, steam slowly fading into the cold morning air. Daniel's voice echoed in my mind. "Don't open the door. Not for anyone." Another knock came, louder this time. "Mom." A man's voice called from outside. "We need to speak with you." My heart pounded against my ribs so hard it almost hurt. My feet felt rooted to the floor, but somehow I forced myself to move. Slowly, quietly, I walked toward the front hallway. The house felt too silent. Even the ticking clock seemed louder than usual. I reached the door but didn't touch the handle. Instead, I stepped to the side window and gently pulled the curtain back just enough to peek outside. Two men stood on my porch. They wore RCMP uniforms. My breath caught in my throat. Their red serge jackets stood out sharply against the pale snow. Both wore dark hats, and their boots left deep prints in the fresh snow near the steps. For a moment, relief washed over me. Maybe Daniel sent them, I thought. But then doubt followed quickly behind. Daniel's warning returned like a cold whisper. "Don't open the door." One of the men stepped closer to the door and knocked again. "Knock knock, Mom," he called. "This is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We need to speak with you regarding your son." My chest tightened. Regarding your son. Something terrible had happened. I could feel it. Still, I didn't unlock the door. "What is this about?" I asked through the closed door, raising my voice slightly. The men exchanged quick glances. Even from inside, I could see the movement. "Your son, Officer Daniel Carter," the taller man began. He paused. "There's been an incident." The word incident made my stomach twist. "What kind of incident?" I demanded, keeping my voice steady. The second officer stepped forward now. "He's missing, ma'am." Missing. The word hit me like a sudden wave of ice. My knees felt weak, and I grabbed the wall to steady myself. "Missing," I repeated. "What do you mean missing?" "What can explain everything?" The first man said calmly. "Please open the door so we can talk." His tone sounded professional, but something about it felt wrong. I studied them more carefully through the narrow opening in the curtain. That's when I noticed it. Something small, but important. Their uniforms looked it off. The badges didn't shine the way real ones did. They looked dull, almost scratched. One man's collar sat crooked, and the stitching on his sleeve looked loose. And their boots. They were muddy. Thick, dark mud clung to the soles. But it hadn't rained in days. Snow covered everything. There was no mud anywhere in town. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. Then another memory surfaced in my mind. Daniel's voice from years ago. Mom, if anyone ever claims to be police, always ask to see identification. Real officers will never hesitate. I swallowed hard. Show me your identification, I said loudly. The words hung in the air. For a moment, neither man moved. Their stillness made my fear grow stronger. Mom, the taller one replied after a pause, forcing a tight smile, we don't have time for delays. Show me your ID. I repeated, firmer this time. Silence. The two men glanced at each other again. Longer this time. Something wasn't right. I felt it deep inside. Finally, the second man stepped forward slightly. Ma'am, please open the door, he insisted. We need to discuss your son's situation immediately. Fa's voice sounded sharper now, less patient, more demanding. My fear turned into certainty. These were not real officers. My hands trembled, but I stepped back from the door. I'm calling the police, I said. The change in their faces happened instantly. The forced smiles disappeared. Their eyes hardened. Without another word, the taller man turned and walked quickly down the steps. The second man followed close behind. I watched through the curtain as they hurried toward a black pickup truck parked halfway down the street. The engine started. Snow sprayed behind the tires as the truck sped away. Within seconds, it disappeared around the corner. My heart raced wildly. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed my phone and dialed 11. The operator answered quickly. 911, what is your emergency? My name is Margaret Carter, I said, trying to steady my shaking voice. Two men came to my house pretending to be RCMP officers. They said my son was missing. Stay calm, Mom, the operator replied. Can you describe the men? I described everything I remembered, their height, uniforms, the black truck. Then I asked the question that terrified me most. Is my son really missing? There was a pause on the line. A long pause. When the operator spoke again, her tone had changed. Mom, please stay inside your home. Officers are on their way. My chest tightened. What about my son? I asked again. Another pause. Then she answered. Officer Daniel Carter was officially reported missing this morning at 8:12 a.m. The room seemed to spin. So it was true. Daniel was missing, and the men who came to my door, they already knew. I slowly lowered myself into a chair, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Outside, the street looked peaceful, quiet. But now I knew the truth. Someone dangerous had come looking for me, and they would probably come back. The sound of sirens grew louder outside my house. At first it was faint, like a distant cry carried by the wind. But within seconds, the noise became sharp and clear. Red and blue lights flashed across my living room walls, reflecting through the curtains like bursts of lightning. I rushed to the window and peeked outside. Two RCMP vehicles pulled into my driveway. This time, I felt a small sense of relief. But fear still sat heavy in my chest. The officers stepped out carefully. Unlike the men from earlier, these officers moved with calm confidence. Their uniforms looked clean and precise. Their badges shone under the morning light. One of them approached the front door. Knock, knock, Mom, this is the RCMP. A firm but respectful voice called. We're here to help. I took a deep breath. Daniel's warning echoed again in my mind. Don't trust anyone without proof. Show me your identification, I called through the door. Of course, ma'am. The officer replied immediately. Through the small window beside the door, I watched as both officers held up their identification cards. They pressed them close enough for me to read their names and see the official seals. Everything looked proper. Still nervous, I unlocked the door slowly and opened it just a few inches. The cold winter air rushed inside. Mrs. Carter, the older officer asked gently. Yes, I answered. We're Officers Grant and Patel. You reported suspicious individuals at your home. I nodded and stepped aside, letting them enter. As soon as they walked inside, the house felt slightly safer. But the tension remained. Please tell us everything that happened, Officer Grant said, pulling out a small notebook. I described the fake officers, their uniforms, the truck, and what they said about Daniel being missing. My voice trembled at times, but I forced myself to stay calm. Officer Patel listened carefully, occasionally asking small questions. "Did you notice any marks on the truck?" he asked. "No," I replied. "Just that it was black and dirty." Officer Grant finished writing and looked up at me. "Mom, did your son contact you recently?" he asked. The question made my stomach tighten. I hesitated. Then I nodded slowly. "Yes," I whispered. "He called me last night." Both officers stiffened. "What time?" Officer Patel asked. 12:07 a.m. They exchanged serious glances. "What exactly did he say?" Officer Grant asked. I repeated Daniel's words carefully. Every detail I could remember, his warning, the strange noises, the fear in his voice. As I spoke, their expressions grew darker. "He told me not to open the door," I finished quietly. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Officer Patel spoke. "Mom, your son was last seen yesterday evening," he said. "He was working on a case involving stolen police equipment." My heart skipped. "Stolen equipment?" I asked. Officer Grant nodded. "Uniforms, badges, radios, even weapons," he explained. "Someone has been stealing official gear and using it to impersonate officers." A cold chill moved through me. That explained the fake uniforms. But why Daniel? Why my son? Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind. "Wait," I said quickly. Both officers looked at me. "Daniel sent me a package yesterday," I added. "A small one. It arrived in the afternoon." "You didn't open it?" Officer Patel asked. I shook my head. "No. I thought it was just something ordinary." "Where is it now?" Officer Grant asked. "In the hallway closet." My heart pounded as I hurried down the hallway. My hands trembled as I reached into the closet and pulled out a small brown package. It felt heavier than I expected. I carried it back into the living room and placed it carefully on the table. Both officers stepped closer. Officer Grant opened the box slowly, using a pocket knife to slice the tape. Inside, wrapped in layers of paper, was a small black voice recorder. We all stared at it in silence. "What is it?" I whispered. Officer Patel picked it up carefully. "Let's find out," he said. He pressed the play button. A crackling sound filled the room. Then, Daniel's voice, clear, serious. "If you're hearing this," he began, "it means something went wrong." My chest tightened instantly. Tears filled my eyes as I listened. "I discovered a group stealing police uniforms and equipment." Daniel continued. "They're planning something big, something dangerous." The officers leaned closer, listening carefully. I tried reporting it. Daniel said, but things didn't feel right. Files went missing. People avoided my questions. His voice grew quieter. "I don't know who to trust anymore. Not even inside the department." A heavy silence filled the room. Officer Grant's jaw tightened. The recording continued. "If they come to the house, it means they know about you," Daniel said. "Stay inside. Lock every door. And whatever happens, don't trust anyone without proof." My hands covered my mouth. Daniel had known. He had planned this. He had sent the recorder to protect me. But then came the final part of the recording. Daniel spoke again. Slower this time. More serious. "I think one of our own officers is helping them." The room fell into complete silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Officer Patel slowly turned off the recorder. I stared at them, my heart racing. "One of your own officers," I whispered. Officer Grant nodded grimly. "It's possible," he said. Fear spread through me like ice. Because if Daniel was right, then the danger wasn't just outside. It was already inside the police force. After hearing the recording, the mood inside my house changed completely. The officers no longer looked calm. They looked tense. Officer Grant held the recorder carefully in his hands, as if it were the most important object in the world. Officer Patel stepped aside and spoke quietly into his radio, reporting what we had just heard. I sat on the couch, gripping the edge of the cushion. My hands were cold, even though the heater was running. "Mom," Officer Grant said gently, turning toward me, "this recording is very important. Your son was trying to expose something serious." I nodded slowly, unable to speak. Inside the police force. The idea terrified me. If Daniel was right, then the criminals weren't just pretending to be officers. One real officer was helping them. Do you know anyone Daniel worked closely with? Officer Patel asked, finishing his radio call. I thought for a moment. One face came to mind immediately. Yes, I said quietly. His supervisor, Sergeant Mark Lewis. The name felt heavy in my mouth. Both officers exchanged a quick glance. What can you tell us about him? Officer Grant asked. He seemed kind, I replied. He came to dinner once last summer. Daniel respected him, said he was experienced and trusted. I remembered that evening clearly. Mark had laughed loudly, complimented my cooking, and spoken proudly about Daniel's work. Now, that memory made my stomach twist. Officer Patel wrote down the name. We'll look into him, he said. The hours that followed felt long and exhausting. Officers came and went from the house, asking more questions and collecting details. They took the recorder as evidence and promised to keep me informed. By late afternoon, the sun had begun to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. That's when the phone rang again. Officer Grant answered quickly. I watched his face as he listened. At first, he looked focused. Then his expression changed. His jaw tightened. What did you find? Officer Patel asked. Grant ended the call slowly. We traced the black truck, he said. My heart began racing. Who owns it? Patel asked. Grant hesitated before answering. Sergeant Mark Lewis. The room fell silent. The words echoed in my mind. Sergeant Mark Lewis. Daniel's supervisor. The man who had once sat at my dinner table. I felt dizzy, as if the floor beneath me had shifted. No, I whispered. That can't be right. But the looks on their faces told me it was true. He's not answering calls. Officer Grant continued, and he didn't report for duty today. Officer Patel crossed his arms. That makes him our primary suspect. Primary suspect. Those words felt unreal. How could someone trusted by the police become a criminal? Even worse. How could Daniel have faced him alone? Later that evening, more officers arrived with additional updates. They had searched Mark Lewis's home. He was gone. Vanished without a trace. But they found something else. Evidence. Boxes of stolen equipment, uniform patches, badges, and radio parts, hidden in his basement. My hands trembled as I listened. Daniel had been telling the truth all along. Mark Lewis was involved. And now he had disappeared. Which meant one terrifying possibility. He had Daniel. As darkness settled outside, the tension inside the house grew heavier. Officers continued making calls, studying maps, and checking reports. Then just after 10:30 p.m., another update arrived. Officer Patel rushed into the living room, holding a phone. We've got a signal, he said urgently. Officer Grant stood immediately. From where? A mobile phone connected to Lewis. Patel replied. It pinned near the old Riverside warehouse. The words made my pulse quicken. The Riverside warehouse. I knew that place. An abandoned building, the river, left empty for years. Cold. Isolated. Perfect for hiding someone. Do you think Daniel is there? I asked weakly. Officer Grant nodded. It's possible. Within minutes, officers began preparing for action. More police vehicles gathered outside my home. Lights flashed against the snow, turning the quiet neighborhood into a scene of tension and urgency. I watched through the window as officers loaded equipment into their vehicles. Body armor, flashlights, radios. The reality of the situation hit me hard. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a rescue. Hours passed slowly as I waited inside. Every minute felt endless. I paced the living room, unable to sit still. My thoughts raced with fear and hope. Was Daniel alive? Was he hurt? Or worse? Suddenly, around midnight, the same time Daniel had called the night before, my phone rang again. The sound made me jump. All movement in the room stopped. Every officer turned toward me. Unknown number. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. Hello, I whispered. Silence. Then, Mum, Daniel's voice weak, barely audible. Tears filled my eyes instantly. Daniel, I cried. Where are you? I don't have much time, he whispered. Mark, he's behind everything. My heart pounded wildly. He trapped me inside the warehouse. Daniel continued. He thinks I copied the evidence. Are you hurt? I asked desperately. Just tired, he said weakly. And cold. My chest tightened painfully. Daniel, listen, I said. The police know where you are. They're coming. There was a pause. Then he spoke again. Mom, if they move me tonight, I may not survive. The words felt like a knife to my heart. Before I could respond, I heard footsteps in the background. Heavy footsteps. Daniel inhaled sharply. They're coming back, he whispered. Daniel, stay strong, I cried, but the line went dead. Silence filled the room. Officer Grant lowered his radio and looked at the others. Move out, he ordered. Within seconds, officers rushed outside. Sirens roared to life, cutting through the cold night air. Red and blue lights flashed as the vehicles sped away toward the river. The raid had begun. And somewhere inside that dark, abandoned warehouse my son was waiting. The police convoy moved fast through the dark roads. Sirens cutting through the silence of the night. Snowflakes drifted through the headlights like falling ash. The closer they got to the river, the more isolated the world became. I stayed behind at home, sitting on the couch without moving. The house felt too big, too quiet, and too empty. Every second felt heavier than the last. My phone was in my hand, but I didn't dare touch it. I was waiting for news. Any news about Daniel. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows again, the same sound I had heard the night before everything started. But now it didn't feel normal. It felt like a warning. At the riverside area, the police vehicles slowed down. The old warehouse appeared ahead, rising from the darkness like a broken shadow. Its walls were cracked, and its windows were mostly shattered. Rusted metal doors hung slightly open, swinging gently in the wind. Officer Grant stepped out first, followed by Officer Paddle and several armed units. Flashlights cut through the darkness as they moved closer. Stay sharp, Grant whispered into his radio. Suspect is armed and dangerous. Possible hostage inside. The team spread out quietly, surrounding the building. Snow crunched softly under their boots. The only other sound was the distant flow of the river. Inside the warehouse, everything was dark. But then, a faint sound. A chair scraping. Everyone froze. Grant raised his hand, signaling the team to move forward slowly. Inside, the air was cold and damp. The smell of rust and old wood filled the space. Flashlight beams moved across broken crates and scattered equipment. Then they saw it. A locked metal door at the far end. And behind it, a faint sound of movement. Grant stepped forward and kicked the door hard. It didn't open. Stand back, Patel said. He took a tool and forced the lock. The door flew open. And there he was. Daniel, tied to a metal chair in the center of the room. His uniform was torn, his face pale, and dark circles showed under his eyes. But he was alive. Daniel! Grant shouted. Daniel lifted his head slowly, as if it took all his strength. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then he whispered, "You came." Relief flooded the room as officers rushed in to untie him. Patel quickly checked his pulse and injuries. "He's alive," Patel confirmed. Weak, but stable. Daniel's hands were shaking as the ropes were cut. "Where is he?" Grant asked urgently. "Where's Mark Lewis?" Daniel looked around the room, panic suddenly rising in his eyes. "He was here," Daniel whispered. "He left not long ago. He said he had unfinished business." Grant's expression tightened. "Unfinished business? What does that mean?" Daniel swallowed hard. "He knows about my mother," he said weakly. "He said she's next." At that exact moment, every officer in the room froze. The danger wasn't over. It had already moved closer. Back at my house, I suddenly felt a strange uneasiness I couldn't explain. The lights flickered once. Then again. I stood up slowly. "Hello," I called out, even though I was alone. Silence answered me. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a dog barked loudly. Then came a sound I will never forget. A soft knock at the back door. I turned instantly. My breath stopped. Another knock followed, slow and deliberate. Knock, knock, not urgent, not random. Intentional. My heart began pounding again. I stepped backward slowly, my eyes fixed on the door. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice shaking. No answer. Only silence. Then, a faint voice, almost a whisper from outside. "Open the door." My blood turned cold. Meanwhile, at the warehouse, Daniel was being helped onto a stretcher when Officer Pedolio suddenly crackled. "Possible movement at secondary location." A voice said. "One may have a second target." Grant grabbed the radio immediately. "Location." There was a pause. Then the answer came. "Carter residence." Grant's face went pale. "Move," he shouted. The entire team rushed back toward their vehicles. Sirens erupted once again. They had just saved Daniel. But they might be too late to save me. At my house the knocking came again, this time louder. Harder. The door rattled slightly in its frame. I stepped back into the hallway, my whole body shaking. And then, I saw something through the side window. A black truck, parked outside my house, engine running, headlights off, and a shadow moving slowly toward my back door. The same truck from before. The same threat. My breath caught in my throat. "Daniel," I whispered helplessly. But this time, it wasn't Daniel who answered. It was the sound of the door handle slowly turning.